Well, there's not much you can do about it now. It's coming. In about a week's time, your last ever school result, a grade that's been 13 years in the making, is going to be released. And best believe it's going to be an emotional day. All of the prep, the hyping up, the predictions, the stress, it all leads to this moment. And contrary to what you may think, it's a moment that doesn't actually mean a whole lot. Now I know, the idea that your ATAR isn't the be-all and end-all isn't new. In fact, many of you have probably heard this and, like me, just disregarded it, assuming this point of view really only applies when you're much older. Like, obviously an ATAR isn't really that important when you've already graduated and you're in your career. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that right now, only a few months before many of you start uni, your ATAR doesn't really matter. Now, just let me explain myself. There's no denying a higher ATAR does make things a little bit more straightforward in terms of exploring your options post-school. But regardless of the number you're given on that day, I guarantee you'll be able to do almost anything you want with relatively little hassle. And if you don't believe me, just watch this video where Majella goes through how you can get into almost any course regardless of your ATAR. She goes through a bunch of your options in detail, so you can really put that statement into perspective. But before you go and watch that video, I've got a few things that I would like to share. Things that I wish I had known on the ATAR release day, and that would have dramatically changed how I approached the few months leading up to when I started uni. And just before I jump into all of that, all I ask is that you consider going down and hitting the subscribe button. Now let's get into it. Now this first tip is actually something that would probably be easier to do before the ATAR release day. So for those of you who are watching it before you know what your ATAR is, you guys are in the best position because it involves kind of forgetting what your ATAR is entirely. Because my first and most important tip is to simply ask yourself, if there were no restrictions imposed by the universities or by your parents or by your friends, what would you want to do with your life? Now, don't take that and think you need to decide exactly how your future career is going to plan out or anything like that. All you need to do is start the thought process. Now that you've got school out of the way, exams are done, you have a little more mental capacity to sort of think about and reflect over the last 18 years and think, what do I actually enjoy doing? And the reason this is such an important question to ask, especially with those restrictions taken out of the question, is because so many students will put these non-existent barriers in place and ultimately end up limiting themselves on what they can achieve. If they are always bogged down by this false idea that not having a high enough ATAR means that potential career or job is completely out of the question, then they may never jump for it and never strive to find those pathways, which, like I said, are actually a lot easier to navigate than you may have initially thought. So please, although it may be hard, just take some time to think with no restriction. Think about your personality type, what you enjoy doing, when you're the most energetic or happy or excited, and then ask questions, look around to see, are there career paths that I can take which would result in me doing those activities that really make me tick more often than not. And then with that, although in the beginning it may not be as crystal clear as a specific degree and specific career path, at least you'll know the type of direction you want to head, and you can start to figure out the pathway necessary to get there. My next tip would be to make sure that you keep as many doors open as possible. What I mean by this is just try to avoid having all of your eggs in one basket. The first few years out of school are actually where we see the biggest changes in our values and our opinions on things. And so in my opinion, relying on just one offer or one application for what you're going to do after school is a pretty big risk. And I'll tell you from personal experience, through the thousands of students that I've helped with their university applications, so many will have changes of mind throughout the process. There still is quite a bit of time between now and the end of February next year, which is when most universities will start their semester. And so if you've only got that one offer, and say by midway through January you have a change of heart, it's going to be much harder to explore additional options than if you were to just take a few steps now to ensure that you get as many offers as possible. So on a practical level, what does this look like? Well, with a simple admission center application, which most of you should have one by now, you can actually get upwards of 5 offers in most cases if you play your cards right. Now, in order to do that, you do need to be quite familiar with the key date of the admission center that applies to your application, and you need to know a little bit about how the assessment process works. And although I won't be going through that in detail in this video, I'll pop a link in the description to our short video course which goes through it in detail. It basically breaks down, depending on which admission center you're going through, how you need to be ordering your preference list based on the important dates, and what changes you need to make in order to use the system to your advantage and get multiple offers with the one application. And my third tip, although it was partly covered in what I just said, I want to emphasize that knowing the important dates of your admission center is so important. If you simply go to the website of the admission center that applies to you and type in important dates into their search bar, you'll be able to find all the information that you need to know. Things like, when is the last day to change your preferences? When are the offers going to be released? How many rounds of offers there are going to be? And like I said, if you're able to understand these and use them to your advantage, you'll be able to make the most of every single offer round, maximizing your chances of receiving an offer, and sometimes almost knowing the result before the offers come out. And my fourth and final tip is to simply celebrate your achievement. Now, I know next week there are going to be some of you that are disappointed with the number you receive, and while I do understand why you'll be feeling that way, try to think about the bigger picture. You've just completed 13 years of education, and the purpose of that education wasn't to try and get the highest possible score on this random day in December. No, the purpose of this education is to mold you as a human being, introduce you to the different subject matter that is available in the world, and test out which of those subject matter suit your personality type best. So if at the end of the day, the score you receive next week is lower than what you expected, then just take that as an indication that what you explored in school doesn't quite match your personality type. Use that as motivation now to try and find out what that is, and be excited by the fact that there is so much still to explore. So please, whatever happens, whatever the outcome, make it a priority that you get together with friends, you get together with family, or you spend time doing something that you really enjoy. Celebrate the last 13 years for what they were, and prepare to make the next 13 even better.